Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to seminar online. Today, I will do seminar online. Before I start my research proposal, I would like to thank for Rona Elviza, SPD, MVD as my first advisor. I would like to thank for Gatot Subroto, SS, MVD as my second advisor. I would like to thank for Nana Raihana, SPD, SH, M Home as first examiner. I would like to thank for Dewi Murni, SS, MVD as my second examiner. Alright, let's go to the slide. My research proposal entitled The Influence of Guessing Game on Student Speaking Skill at MTS Negeri Tanjung Pinang. My research proposal consists 3 chapters. The first chapter is Introduction. 1.1 Background. Based on the observation at MTS Negeri Tanjung Pinang, the researcher was found that students face many problems in learning English. The problems faced by students are difficult to speak English, could pronounce some words correctly, had lack vocabulary, and low motivation to learn English. Then they are afraid to make mistake when they pronounce some words and not confident to express and share their ideas and in English. From the problem mentioned above, that was why the researcher interested to conduct the research to find out if there is any influence of guessing game on student speaking skill at MTS Negeri Tanjung Pinang. By using this technique, the researcher hopefully that the student will be able to speak and describe something. 1.2 Identification of the problem. First, the student felt difficult to speak English. They could not pronounce some words correctly. Say, they had vocabulary mastery to produce English words. The student also had low motivation to learn English. A. They were afraid to make mistakes when they pronounce some words, produce language, and speak English. They were not confident to express and share their ideas in English. Next, 1.3 Limitation of the problem. Based on the identification of the problem, the researcher limits the problem only focus on students feel difficult to speak English. Next, 1.4 Research question. The problem that will be discussed in the study are: is there any significant influence of guessing game on student speaking skill at MTS Negeri Tanjung Pinang? Next, 1.5 Purpose of the research. The purpose of the research is to find out whether or not there is a significant influence of guessing game on student speaking skill at MTS Negeri Tanjung Pinang. Next, 1.6 Benefit of the research. For theoretical, this research can be useful input to develop guessing game as teaching media. The researcher also hope this study can be used as reference to other researchers which observe about the influence of guessing game. For practically, this research expect to give useful information for the English teacher about the influence of the guessing game in teaching speaking skill. Next, 1.7 Definition of custom. Guessing game is a game in which a person or participant knows something and compete individually or in team to identify or to find out the answer. Speaking is one of the activity to describe or explain about person, animal, or thing orally. Descriptive text. Descriptive text is a text that aims to describe about people, animal, place, and thing. Now we go to chapter 2, review of related literature. 2.1 Theoretical review. 2.1.1 Definition of speaking. According to Brown and Burns et al. In Leong and Ahmadi 2017, speaking as an interactive process of making meaning that includes producing, receiving, and processing information. According to Combe et al. In Gotpe 2017, speaking is an important channel of communication in a general English program. Noonan 2005, speaking is equally important in young learner language development. According to Parker 2014, state that speaking is an ability that is taken for granted, learned as it is through a process of socialization through communicating. Moreover, Cameron 2001, definition of speaking. Speaking is the active use of language to express meaning, so that speaking is much more demanding than listening language on learners' language resource and skills. According to Kai 2006, speaking is the ability to express a sequence of ideas plainly. Next, 2.1.2 Elements of speaking. The first, pronunciation. According to Geralds 2001, pronunciation is the way for students to produce clear language when they speak. 2. Grammar. Purpura 2004. Grammar a set of rules or principles that can be used to generate all well-formed or grammatical assurance in the language. 3. Vocabulary. Beyond 2006 defines vocabulary as means the appropriate diction which is used in communication. So vocabulary very important to speak English. Fluency. Fluency means as the ability to speak fluently and accurately. 5. Comprehension. Comprehension refers to the fact that participants fully understand the nature of the research project, even when products are complicated and interest. Cohen 2007. Next, 2.1.3 Purpose of speaking. The purpose of speaking can be divided into two: transactional and instructional. Transactional purpose focus on how the speaker make and deliver the message to the listener, while the instructional purpose focus on building good relationship. Next, 2.1.4 Teaching speaking. In teaching speaking, especially English, in teaching students how to communicate orally to others. Moreover, the teacher has to find and prepare the material, give clear explanation or direction, and also make relationship the material that they have learned to their own lives. Next, 2.1.5 Types of speaking activity. According to Kai 2006, there are some activities that the teacher can use in teaching speaking skill. First, discussion, role play, simulation, brainstorming, and interview. 2.1.6 Definition of descriptive text. According to Karima 2016, descriptive text is a text that consists of view of a writer's perspective, or subjective and objective, about an object that purposes to inform or persuade the reader about the object. According to Oshima and Hugo 1997, tells how something looks, feels, smells, tastes, and or sounds. According to Cremon 1983, Descriptive text is strategy for presenting a verbal portrait of a person, a place, and or thing. Next, 2.1.7 kinds of descriptive text. Descriptive text is a text to describe something such as a person's place or a thing. So, it can be three forms. First, description of persons. In describing a person, there are many ways such as his or her face, the color of hair, clothes, body shape, and etc. 2. Description of place. In describing a place, for example a school, so it is important to give a clear picture of the size and arrangement of the space involved. 3. Description of thing. When we describe about something, we have to mention with the detailed character, so the listener can imagine and get the clearly picture of the thing. We must consider of what is the color. Next, 2.1.8 Characteristic of descriptive text. According to Garrett et Whitnell, 1994, a descriptive text employs the following linguistic features. 1. Focus on specific participant as the main character. 2. Use present tense as dominant tenses. 3. Use linking verb. 4. Use action verb. And last, use adjective and adverb. Next, 2.1.9 Generic structure of descriptive text. According to Wardiman et al. 2008, specify the generic structure of descriptive text into two parts. That is, identification and description. First, identification is the part of paragraph that introduces the character. 2. Description. Description is the part of paragraph that describes the character. Next, 2.1.10 Definition of game. According to Wright 2006, game is an activity which is entertaining and engaging, often challenging, and an activity in which a learner play and usually interact with others. According to Setosvili 2002, state that game can be important and enjoyable ways of practicing vocabulary for learners. Next, 2.1.11 The theories of guessing games. According to Clifford 1994, guessing game is a game in which a person or participant knows something and compete individually or in team to identify or to find out the answer. According to Klimova 2015, guessing games are a variation of information gap games. According to Webster 1986, guessing game is a game in which a participant compete individually or a team in identification of something. Next, 2.1.12 Teaching speaking by guessing game. According to Harmer in Swan 2018, the guessing game procedure is as follows. First, students are divided into small groups. Second, on each team, one member sits back to the blackboard. Third, the teacher writes words and phrases on the board. Fourth, all groups who can see this word or phrase must explain. And the last, if a student who turns his back to the board can guess a word or phrase or picture, the team will get the points. Next, 2.1.13 The advantages and disadvantages of using guessing game. There are some advantages of using guessing game. technique in teaching speaking, as cited by Hidayat 2013. They are: first, guessing game can be used as new technique in teaching and learning process. Two, guessing game can make the student happy in speaking English. 3. Create the well conditioned and enjoyable in the classroom. Thus, the disadvantages of using this game will happen if the teacher couldn't use the time effectively and efficiently. Next, 2.2 previous study. The first study was conducted by Puspitasari and Asari, 2018. The effect of using interactive guessing game technique on fluency students' speaking skill at MTS Bustanul Ulum Tanggung Prigal. This research is experimental research. The population of the research was 8th grade students of MTS Bustanul Ulum Tanggung Prigal. The second study was conducted Rahmawati 2016 with her study entitled The Effectiveness of Using Guessing Game Technique Toward the 8th grade students speaking skill at MTS Negeri Bandung. The population of the research are all students of the 8th grade students of MTS Negeri Bandung. The sample is HC class consisting 42 students. The third study was conducted by Rizal 2016 entitled The Use of Guessing Game in Teaching Speaking, an experimental study at the first grade students of SMP Negeri 3 Gunung Sari. The researcher took one class as the sample of the research. Next, 2.3 Conceptual Framework. First, teaching speaking skill in discrete text. For experimental class, the researcher will use guessing game, while for control class, no treatment applied. And then, the influence of guessing game on student speaking skill. Next, 2.4 Research Hypothesis. Null hypothesis is there is no significant influence of guessing game on student speaking skill at MTS Negeri Tanjung Pinang. Well, alternative hypothesis, there is any significant influence of guessing game on student speaking skill at MTS Negeri Tanjung Pinang. Next, we go to chapter 3, Research Method. 3.1 Research Design. Because the research is quasi-experimental method, the researcher chose the student become two classes, namely experimental and control class. In experimental class, the researcher will give treatment by using guessing game. Meanwhile, for control class, the researcher doesn't use treatment because it is only a compare class. But control class only have pre-test and post-test. We can see it group experimental, pre-test, treatment, post-test. So in experimental class, for the first meeting, the researcher will give pre-test. The second meeting, the researcher will give post-treatment, and the third meeting, the researcher also give treatment, and the fourth meeting, the researcher will give a post-test for the student. Meanwhile, for control class, the researcher only give free test and post-test. Next, 3.2 Place and time of study. This research will be conducted at a grade student of MTS Negeri Tanjung Pinang. It is located at Jalan Raja Ali Haji, kilometer 4, Tanjung Pinang. This research will be conducted on March until April 2020. Next, 3.3 Population and Sample. The population of the research is all the age grade students of MTS Negeri Tanjung Pinang. There are 6 classes. This grade, which consists of 182 students. For the sample of this research is H1 31 student experimental class and H2 31 students as control class. Next, 3.4 Sampling. The researcher will use purposive sampling to choose the sample. Purposive sampling is sampling technique with certain consideration, according to Sugiono 2012. Next, 3.5 Data collection technique. In collecting the data, the researcher will use the oral test, consist, pretest, and post-test. The experimental class will treatment by guessing game. Then, the researcher gives them post-test as the way of collecting the data. The aim of this test is to compare whether the use of guessing game is influence the student speaking skill or not. Next, 3.6 Research Instrument. According to Wilkinson in Birmingham 2003, research instruments are simply devices for obtaining information relevant to your research project, and there are many alternatives from which to choose. The instrument in this research is oral test. Next, 3.7 Research procedures. First, preparation stage. The researcher will propose the research permit to Universitas Maritim Raja Ali Haji Tanjung Pinang. The researcher will send the research permit to MTS Negeri Tanjung Pinang and create the research instruments. 2. Implementation stage. The researcher will divide subject of the research into 2 groups. The researcher will give the pretest and posttest to both control and experimental class. The researcher will conduct the teaching learning process by using the guessing game in experimental class. They compare the result by both classes. 3. Final stage. The researcher will analyze the data and conclude the result. Next, 3.8 Technique of data analysis. The student speaking scores in pretest and posttest will assess by using 5 components of grading speaking skill in descriptive text by Hughes 2003. The formula will be used for calculating the student score. P sama dengan R per N kali 100. Note, P as student final score, R student raw score from the rubric, and rubric maximum score. Next, 3.9 Data analysis. A. Statistic descriptive. The purpose of statistic descriptive test is at describing the information which collect during a research. B. Normality test. The normality test is used to find out whether a class has normal data distribution or not. C. Homogeneity test. After the normality test shows that the data is normally distributed, then the researcher will conduct the homogeneity test. Next, hypothesis test. Hypothesis test will use to know the different scores of pretest and posttest from both experimental and control classes. After that, the researcher will establish the hypothesis of the research as follows. No hypothesis. There is no significant influence of guessing game to student skill in speaking of 8th grade student of MTS Negeri Tanjung Pinang. Alternative hypothesis. There is significant influence of guessing game to student skill. In speaking of as grade student of MTS Negeri Tanjung Pinang. Alright, that's all my presentation today. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.